Hello from Cambridge, Massachusetts on Friday, April 23rd. This is Len Edgerly. Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles. I have another conversation this week with James McQuivey of Forrester. It's been good to check in with him regularly during the pandemic this past year, and it's been 5 months since we talked with him last, so lots to catch up on. I'll also have some news about updated Echo Buds and Brad Stone's book. I've received my advance copy. I can't tell you anything about it yet, but we'll talk about its approach. And let's see. Then I also have a tech tip for you. Let's get started. First up in news, updated Echo Buds, second generation of the earbuds that have Alexa in them. These were introduced in September of 2019 when I flew out pre-COVID, way pre-COVID, to see all the new products that Amazon was announcing at that time. I bought the original Echo Buds. I thought it was interesting that you would just be able to walk through the grocery store and talk to Alexa, although that might have been a little odd. And I never really used them. I thought they were way too big. They were heavy. They looked like hearing aids in the ear, and I had a lot of trouble pairing them. So they just sort of drifted off as things I tried but didn't stick with. And now comes a second generation, and according to the coverage of it, there's been improvements. There's 3 microphones in each of the buds in the ear. They're lighter. They're 20% smaller. The case is smaller, and they're being offered for a limited time at an introductory price of $100, available for pre-order with delivery May 12th. And I did pre-order them so I can try them out and see what they're like. You know, that price is pretty amazing compared with Apple's AirPods Pro, which I also have. I enjoy a lot, $249. But at this introductory price of $100, pretty attractive. You can get a wireless charging case if you pay $120, and then if you pay $137.98, you get all of that plus the charging pad. I'm hoping that the charging case for these Echo Buds will work with my Apple charging pad. We'll see. We'll see about that. It comes in white or black. It has 5 hours of music playback on one charge. You can get 2 hours of additional playing time just with a 15-minute charge. It's surprisingly, it supports Siri and Google Assistant, not just Alexa, and you set it up in the Alexa app. I think it's good to see a product like this updated. They also upgraded the Echo frames, which I used for a while. I thought they were kind of bulky, and I was just using them as Bluetooth speakers to listen to podcasts when I was on a walk or doing the dishes. And I think actually the AirPods or the Echo Buds make more sense than having Alexa built into the glasses. At least that's my evaluation from having worn the glasses for probably 6 months or so. And I hope these new ones really are more comfortable. If they're comparable to the AirPods Pro, then I might prefer to have them just because I can talk to Alexa when I'm on a walk. That could be interesting. For all the Zooming that I do, and I do a fair amount of Zooming, I splurged and got the AirPods Max, which I can't remember exactly what I paid, but it was a lot, maybe around $500. They are gorgeous. I mean, you can't even feel them on your head almost. They're so comfortable, and the audio sound is so great. So if you're somebody who's spending your life Zooming and having to have some audio and microphone built in, you might want to consider these AirPods Max. We'll try out the Echo Buds at the other end of the price range and see how good they are. One thing, there are some software features. Amazon is introducing a feature to help you find the lost ear pods, you can just say, Alexa, find my buds, for example, and that's similar to Apple's Find My software. And Alexa will also offer public transit directions in 7 cities. One of them I'm glad to see is Boston, here in Boston area, New York, Seattle, San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, Jersey City, and Philadelphia. And then other cities are going to be covered in coming months. Echo Buds, available for pre-order at Amazon.com. The second thing I want to talk about is Amazon Unbound, Jeff Bezos and the Invention of a Global Empire. This is the long-awaited, at least by me, book by Brad Stone, who nearly 10 years ago wrote The Everything Store, Jeff Bezos and the Age of Amazon. That so far, I think, is really the definitive profile of Bezos and the company. It's been translated into more than 34 languages. And I've been in touch with Brad off and on as he was working on this new book. It looks like a total rewrite. I don't think it's just like an update of the Everything Store. And as he was finishing it up, I think I saw on social media, he had to do some rewriting when Jeff announced that he was retiring as CEO. And it was Amazon's news is so constant. It's a tough thing to write a book and then know when you can stop writing the book and finally release it. But it's out there. Brad put up a photo today on Instagram of his 104-year-old grandmother proudly holding a copy of her grandson's book in her wheelchair. She looked like a sweet lady. That was really adorable. I'm sure that when the book comes out in May, he's going to be everywhere. And it lands at a time when there's a lot of conversation about Amazon. People are grappling with big tech, but I think especially Amazon. Should it be broken up? Should it be regulated? Is it something that is good or bad? You know, I think obviously the answer is it's not binary. There are impacts that Amazon has that are positive and some that are negative, especially if you're a traditional book publisher or people who have had their businesses upended by some of the innovations that Amazon has carried out. Really, I think those things are carried out by the internet as much as by Amazon. But Brad is a very credible, hardworking reporter, and he's a very good writer. The Everything Store. It was a good read, and I can tell you that. I expect that this book is going to also be a good read. I'll be able to talk about it. Look forward to that in May. For the tech tip, I want to update what I said last week about how to get the new screensaver on a Kindle. This is on the e-ink Kindles. You can go to a setting now and have the book that you're currently reading show up as essentially the cover of your Kindle via the screensaver. It's pretty cool. I enjoy it. I mentioned that if you have a physical cover that closes over the sleeping screen, it doesn't. It sort of defeats the purpose in a way, but anyway, it's still kind of fun. You have to remove special offers if you are currently getting the special offers on your Kindle. And I had said the way I did it was I called Amazon. I said, please remove special offers from my Oasis, and they did. It turns out that you can do it yourself. The way you do it is go to Amazon.com on your phone or your computer, however you get to the website, and then go to the Content and Devices area, click on the Devices tab, and then you choose the Kindle that you want to have this new feature available on and that you need to remove special offers from. Once you've selected that Kindle, in my case, the Oasis, under Details, you'll see something that says Click Remove Offers, and you just click on that button. This will unsubscribe from the special offers. There will be a one-time fee of $20 to do this, so you're essentially paying $20 to shift to being able to see your currently read book as a screensaver. But I thought it was worthwhile. It's something that I did, and I'm glad I did. Once you've done that, you go to settings on your Kindle, your Oasis or whatever, your Paperwhite, go to device options, and you'll see show cover. And that's the thing you want to click if you want to have your screensaver show you the cover of the book that you're currently reading. Time now for the interview I have been checking in with Forrester Vice President and Principal Analyst James McQuivey regularly during this historic past year. This week, we talked about what's ahead for the pandemic, especially in the fall, his latest research on employee creativity, Amazon's union win, Clubhouse, Bitcoin, and an enlightening book that he's reading. As always, I found James's thoughtful, engaged view of the world to be calming and encouraging. We recorded this session on Tuesday, April 21st. I had retreated to my basement bedroom here in Cambridge because there's a loud construction project going on next door in the house that my daughter used to live in. James regularly Zooms all over the world from his basement studio west of Boston, so it felt as if we were two members of a COVID underground sharing notes on history in the making as we were talking to each other from our basements. I'm not as familiar with recording in Zoom as I had become in Skype, so I failed to click the recording button at the beginning of our conversation. Luckily, I realized the error pretty quickly and clicked on the red button just a minute or two late. What you won't hear is my first question, in which I noted that COVID deaths in the U.S. Had been about 267,000 in November when James and I last talked. Now, nearly 5 months later, that number has more than doubled to more than 564,000. James replied by recalling that he had expected total deaths in the U.S. might reach 300,000 and then would taper off.
And it's the lack of tapering that's the most painful. And if you look at where the numbers come from, it's the week after Thanksgiving and the week after Christmas. That's what produced the double spike that essentially made sure that we didn't taper in casualties, which is tragic and, unfortunately preventable. We're very, very fortunate, and I happen to have a friend who's on the Pfizer team, but we're very fortunate that Pfizer, Moderna, that many of these companies were so quickly able to turn this around. Because if you had said to me in December, back when the news on the vaccines was first coming out and that we were hearing that they were effective, if you had said to me, it turns out they're not effective, then I would have dramatically altered all of my forecasts. And numbers were going to keep going up. We were going to have to still be in lockdown for another, year. So we're very, very fortunate, and that oddly is going to create a situation in which some people feel like everything's back to normal and that they don't need the vaccine, which will continue to keep them and others near them at risk. So there's this odd psychology, and this goes back to the reason why I study these things or have in the past is from a health communications perspective. How do you communicate to people? You do need the vaccine, and there are parallels for this. One of the biggest issues in medicine is people not taking their medications because they feel better. And we know this with antibiotics, for example. You get a 10-day course of penicillin or amoxicillin, and on day 6 or 7, you feel pretty good. You think, I don't want to take these anymore. And how do we communicate to people that, no, you actually need to, because you're not addressing symptoms, you're addressing the fundamental thing that is still potentially able to cause you harm. And so that's been a challenge, that kind of communication. And we're going to see that at a macro level. So instead of individuals saying, well, I feel fine, I'm going to avoid the vaccine, it's, well, we are fine. Look, the numbers are down. Everybody's going back to the restaurants. We are fine. We don't need the vaccine. And that's unfortunate. But it's just part of living with our fellow humans, and we'll have to adapt to that.
If we continue on current trends where some people aren't taking the vaccine, as sort of the current mix of people taking it seriously, and you extend that out to the fall and you think about schools and retailing and the workplace, what % of pre-pandemic normal might we reach in the fall, and what might it look like?
It will be pretty back to normal by the fall. I think those kinds of interactions that require that, strangers come together for an evening and then all go their separate ways, in large numbers. And so maybe restaurants would apply, but I'm really talking about concerts and symphony, putting a bunch of strangers in a room who would have come from miles around and would have come from different backgrounds, different attitudes towards health and vaccines and so on. What will happen in the meantime over the summer, and because it's the summer, we'll already have a summer-induced low in potential transmission, which is good. But because the summer, everyone will be feeling pretty good. But they will be isolated more or less in their social interactions to be around other people who are like them. And so those of us who are really ready and eager to see the vaccines proliferate we will tend to be with other people who are vaccinated. Whereas the people who are sort of socially opposed, not medically opposed, but socially opposed to vaccination, will be with other people who are socially opposed to vaccination. But honestly, as long as they all kind of stay in their family groups, work groups, and a few people who've gotten sick already are immune, transmission will be so reduced in those clusters that they will probably say, see, we didn't need to be vaccinated, we're fine. But in the fall, people start going back indoors, and especially people go back to school, schools are going to be an environment where this is a high-risk issue, which is why so many universities have already said you cannot come here if you are not vaccinated. And I think that's probably wise for schools, precisely because they are bringing thousands of strangers together from, in many cases all around the world, but at least all around the country. And that is the big example of bringing people together in a shared environment that could, mean that, sure, you were from a town where not a lot of people got vaccinated and nobody's sick, and so you feel okay. But that doesn't matter once you start mingling with people who are from all over the place who have had different, vaccine and COVID exposure experiences, and suddenly we have another outbreak. Now, gratefully, numerically, the outbreak can't be as big this fall as it would have been, but that still doesn't mean it won't kill people. So, let's just be careful about that. But that raises the issue of vaccine passports, and that's a big one that we're studying and talking to companies about right now. Schools, hospitals, these are sort of the obvious institutions that are going to say to employees at a minimum, and in the case of schools, students, you must be vaccinated to come here. That won't be the case for your local public school per se, although many public schools are exploring what they might do to strongly encourage it. But they probably won't require it, again, for the same reason, because it's the same community of people who all have the roughly the same attitudes and behaviors. And so when they all show up at school, it's not putting them in new kinds of risk, really, but they will still be socially distanced. We start talking about retail environments are going to be significantly more open, but there will still be social distancing. There will probably still be mask wearing. There are people who socially want to continue mask wearing even long after the pandemic is verifiably over. And so we'll see what happens in the fall around that. And unfortunately, it's become so politicized that, you have some people who think that mask wearing is a sign of weakness or failure or stupidity, and you have people who think that not wearing masks is a sign of weakness, failure, or stupidity. And so they're going to go at each other a little bit socially through the rest of this year. But once the immediate harm has passed, I think there is a valid question to be asked. I have a friend who's an oncologist, a surgeon, of course, wears masks in the operating room and now in any kind of medical consultation setting. And he's saying, you know what, why would I ever ride the public transportation in Boston again without a mask? At least during flu season, from sort of September to March. Why? Why would I put myself at risk? Why would I reduce my health? The flu season this year has been so positive because people were distanced, because people were wearing masks, and we're thinking, that's something that kills 10 to 20,000 people in a good year.
Yeah.
40 to 50,000 people in a bad year. And we could reduce a lot of that harm by wearing masks. So I'm not advocating for that or against it. I'm just saying these are the kinds of questions that are going to come out of this. But the fall, we're still dealing with the pandemic, and the masking will still be necessary in retail environments, on airplanes, and so on.
I see the latest Forrester report that you wrote about was titled "Creativity Feeds the Future of Work," and you surveyed 1,000 workers in the U.S. What was the most surprising finding there that energized you to dig in and help your clients get ready for the future of the workplace?
There's an intuitive allure to the idea that creativity can solve problems. We want to believe that human ingenuity, about actually 60% of people in the country believe that human ingenuity will solve the problems that we face.
Really?
That's just part of our attitude. And maybe it's cultural. It might just be human to believe that we can figure this out. But in the workplace, if you ask any executive whether or not creativity is important to the success of their business, they will all say yes. But if you ask them, what are you doing in your organization to ensure that creativity is encouraged and can thrive, they don't really have a thought about how that's going to happen. So we thought, in order to motivate executives to care about creativity, we're going to have to strongly demonstrate that creativity correlates with, at a minimum, predicts at a maximum, a lot of valuable things that companies wish they had more of. And so that's why we did this research. We did this research in 3 countries, the UK, Australia, and the US. The report that we wrote was based off of the US data, which is about a little over 1,000 people. And what we did is we just asked people about their attitude towards the workplace, how proud they are to work where they work, how much they believe their organization does good things for customers, how much they believe their leaders care about their employees, all these things that, again, executives tell you all the time, oh, those are good things. We want those things. And then we separately asked people to describe how creative they felt their environment of their organization, of their company was. And it's amazingly predictive that if someone looks in their work environment and says, this environment encourages creativity, or we are a high creativity environment, they tend to also believe that their leaders are smarter, that their leadership is more empathetic, that they care more about their employees. I mean, it just correlates so well. I use the word correlation correctly because I don't want to say creativity doesn't cause those things, but it seems to be part and parcel with those things. So if you're in a work environment that can stimulate the employees to feel any of those things, chances are they will also perceive creativity. Now, one of the things that they'll experience is increased sense of autonomy and willingness to take risk. Those are specific aspects of creativity. So it's not just I think we're creative, but when asked, I will agree that we're in an environment where we have autonomy, where we can make decisions, where our ideas, if they are good, are acted on quickly. So there's some basis behind it. That's not just the correlation that we're looking for. But then what we're trying to show people during the pandemic is that the organizations that their employees perceive are more creative for these reasons, actually they also believe that their organization is handling the pandemic better. That they're responding more quickly, that they're listening empathetically to employees, which, shouldn't really surprise us. So we wrote the report to say, you want more of all of these things. So you need to create an environment that creates autonomy. So this is interesting because you asked, what's the big surprise for me? It's not that it was a big surprise. It's just that it turns out that having a brand that says we're a creative company or telling employees, be creative, is almost useless. You actually have to have the processes in place that encourage that creativity, that permit someone to spend their curiosity, their mental agility, to say to the world, I have an idea and I want to see if that idea could be used at work. How many times have all of us experienced that moment where we have an idea and we think, I'm not even going to bring this up because no one's going to listen. They're not going to act on it. Or maybe they won't, I won't get anything out of it. Maybe my boss will take that idea to his or her boss and then say, yeah, I had this idea. That does happen.
Yeah.
It's not just a caricature. So you're inhibiting people from contributing in ways that could be fundamental to the organization. And so it's interesting. I had a client reach out after the report and said, oh, we love the report. It's so what we're trying to accomplish here. What's the messaging we need to do inside the organization to create that, to encourage creativity? And I said, zero messaging.
Yeah.
It needs to all be about, we want your ideas. There's room for ideas. We will act on ideas that are good. We will reward you for ideas that are good. And that's just good leadership.
And those are actions. Those aren't words.
And those are actions. They're not messages. And I think that's important.
That's kind of to foster individual creativity, huge benefits. But you also say organizational creativity. What do you have in mind when you move it from the individual employee level to the whole organization?
It's one of those things where people, when we say creativity, in their mind, they immediately think of that creative person. The one who wears really interesting clothes to work and always has these really off-the-wall ideas. And we think, oh, that's what advertising people are supposed to be. They're creative. Or it turns out, though, that it doesn't matter what role you're in. If you perceive that your organization is a creative organization, you will behave more creatively. And so what we're trying to say is this isn't a role thing. It's not a personality thing. And in fact, we think there are more latent creative ideas that aren't surfacing for the reasons I mentioned before. But if you say, oh, that person's not creative, well, have you really given them a chance to be creative? Have you given them the opportunity to feel like it would be rewarding to be creative? And so when we talk about the organizational creativity, we essentially want companies to lay the foundation on which employees have the psychological safety to say, I'm going to take a risk today and say something that I maybe wouldn't have said before. And of course, that means the organization has to be able to say, thank you for that idea. It may not be the right idea at this moment, but the fact that you shared it, I want to reward that.
Right. Because
I need you to share more of those. Because, Picasso only had 1 out of every 20 of his paintings were considered really amazing. So you have to have 20 paintings to have an amazing one. Now, he just happened to paint hundreds and hundreds of paintings. So we think, Picasso was a master. But it's the same way here with ideas at work. You can't have every idea that you offer be a game changer. But you need to be in an environment where your ideas are encouraged so that you can offer enough of them so that a few game changers do come out occasionally.
I was thinking about all this as I was reading Jeff Bezos' last letter as CEO to shareholders, and a couple of things really struck me. He says, did he take comfort in the overwhelming vote against the union? He says, no, he did not. And he said, it's clear to me we need a better vision. He italicized that, for how we create value for employees, a vision for their success. And then if I'm right, I don't think that the basic mission or brand of Amazon has changed since the founding, which was to be the most customer-centric company in the world. And he's now saying, at that level, they're adding, we're going to be Earth's best employer and Earth's safest place to work. And I, as executive chairman, which he becomes soon when he turns over the CEO role, I'm going to invent stuff that makes that happen. We're flexible on tactics, but we're relentless on vision, and we've never failed to meet a vision that we set as something that was crucial. Clearly, the union struggle affected him.
Certainly motivated some of these
him.
Things, yes.
And it comes at an interesting time because he now steps into a different role. But what do you see happening there?
So it was surprising to me. I think it was fundamentally correct and right. But it was surprising because it's not an organization that has been eager, and Bezos, as the head of the organization, I think has been responsible for this. It has not been eager to say, hey, we've fundamentally been doing something wrong, which is the implication of what they're saying. Now, if you're like I am and you've known enough people who've worked at Amazon in enough of roles, I have friends and family who've worked in every type of role, from the most white collar in Seattle down to, warehouse staff and drivers. Some of them love it, some of them hate it. And but that's like any other work environment. And so I think they could very easily have said, we understand that working here is not for everyone. And that has been their standard for a long time. Working at Amazon isn't for everyone. It's really for high performers who are very motivated. And but I think when you are now, employing over 1 million people, I don't even keep up with the number of worldwide employees. It's so large now. You really can't say we only want to take people who have a certain personality profile into our organization. You really can't, because you have roles where those personality characteristics might not even work, much less be easy to find across the world. So for them to acknowledge that their organization needs to be ready to encourage more types of people in more types of roles, I think is very, very smart. And they already had announced, education initiatives. They have health initiatives. Honestly, however you feel about the union organization question down in Alabama, the fact that they're paying twice the minimum wage and have, full health benefits on day one, it's just unheard of in that market, much less most markets in the United States. So, they're on pretty solid ground to say, we're doing a good job here. But for him to come out and essentially tacitly admit, we have room to improve, and we're going to make this a public goal of ours. And they are right. When they make something a public goal, they tend to make significant progress towards that goal.
If you were advising Bezos for the next year on how to make this vision come true, would you draw on some of your research about creativity? It'd be an opportunity to really go there, which would be kind of an extension of Amazon's brand. We dare to fail. We celebrate our failures. Fire Phone leads to Alexa and things like that. Would you see much leverage in turning them into a dramatically more supportive environment for creativity, or what are the top two things you would try to point him toward in achieving this?
Well, I have a hunch that they're going to use a lot of data in how they manage this process. And they're going to say, this is how we'll get there. We need to measure. And I think that's good. However, it will also be very easy to criticize them, as it has been in their warehouses, for using cameras to, unobtrusively collect data about people and to use that data in, termination decisions, which is not incorrect for an organization to do. If someone isn't working well, then you have to figure out what's the solution, and it might be termination. But it's the idea that they're going to have more data on their workers than almost anyone else, and that they're going to probably add more data collection points in order to achieve this goal, because that's what they do. That's how they approach things. That's going to create some obvious opportunities for people to criticize from outside, at least, and certainly from inside as well. So they need to be very, very careful about how they use the data, how they anonymize the data, so that when they're analyzing trends, it can't be identified to specific individuals who get talked about, in ways that might be unflattering. And the challenge with using data, and we have this with a lot of our clients who are going to a lot of trouble now to say, oh, now that we have everyone working from home, we see how long they're logged in and what they're doing on their computers and so on. That's awful to use that data in any way other than to say, how can we support you as an employee in accomplishing the goal that we've asked you to accomplish? So organizations that fall into the trap of, well, let me just kind of see who's working and how hard they're working. It creates a cultural harm that is really hard to escape, and it puts leaders and managers in a very unhealthy place. They need to be coaches and supporters. They don't need to be watchdogs, and that's going to take some time for companies to evolve to that. And I think Amazon, needs to just avoid going there in the first place. Don't become the big brother state that the government never could become, and Amazon actually could if it wanted to, at least with its employees. So that'll be a little bit of a trick. I think to separate the fact that they want to be the world's best employer from the world's safest employer, I think is probably smart, because then they can, and if I were making this clear to Jeff, if I were sitting next to him, I would probably say, make sure that safety thing is so ironclad. Go ahead and experiment with tactics on the greatest place to work part, but make sure the safety thing is so ironclad that you're really above reproach on that one. And that'll earn you a lot of goodwill towards your tactical experimentation on the side.
What do you mean beyond reproach? That the safety, again, you just want to make sure you're not doing things which infringe on people's privacy, or
no. Well, yes, that would be a second order concern there, but I mean, make sure people are well. Make sure that they are safe and healthy, and you don't want any stories of people in the warehouse saying, well, they say they want to be the safest place, but my back is killing me, that kind of stuff. But also they're white-collar workers. People in the office environments, if they're in front of screens all day long and they're working until 9 at night, that's not going to help them sleep. Safest environment is going to expand and should expand to include, what are we doing to our people? This is something that, it'd be amazing if other organizations could learn from Amazon, if Amazon gets this right, to define safety as fully encompassing the wellness of the employee. Because we have, I don't know if you've seen some of these financial services companies that, the brokerages and such in New York, who have had all their people working from home, and now they're having them work even harder because they're working from home, because they, now they have to work until midnight every night. And they have this rule. I can't remember which organization it was that had a rule that, we're going to create the Saturday rule. You can't answer email on Saturday.
Oh, wow.
So that just means you have to hold it all up until Sunday. And so you're working all Sunday long. I think, okay, somebody at some point has to rebel against this. And I know the obscene amounts of money involved are so great that people are willing to do whatever they can to make that money. And I guess that's their choice. But usually most people in that organization are crumbling under the weight of that. Amazon's not even close to that. But wouldn't it be amazing if Amazon could learn that, hey, look, it turns out that when you care about people's wellness and you structure their jobs in such a way that they aren't pulling all-nighters and that they aren't working all weekend, they actually are happier, healthier, and work better. Our data that we have, the data that everyone has on this, suggests that that's going to be true. So it'd be nice if other companies thought, what are what we're doing wrong? We're requiring everyone to work 6 days a week. And, that would be a nice effect. And so I would love it if Bezos decides to just publish what they learn. Not only be the safest, but also publish the insights so that other companies could benefit.
Well, and you could see them doing that with a $15 minimum wage. There have been studies that show it has a ripple effect in a community, and I think they're quite consciously using their experience to have a broader effect. So why not in the kind of things you're talking about with the safety?
Agree.
Well, when you talk about the risk of intrusive data collection, that immediately makes me think about the voices on the left and the right that are raising the issue of antitrust, not just against Amazon, but other big tech companies, but Amazon in particular. In the next year or two, do you think there's going to be just continued talking points and people getting quoted because they're attacking Amazon about antitrust as opposed to any actual action, a case brought by one of the agencies or changes in the law that are going to have any meaningful impact on Amazon's business?
Well, as we're having this conversation, we're just one day away from hearings, Senate confirmation hearings for Lina Khan, who is President Biden's new appointee and will be confirmed. I don't see any reason why she wouldn't be confirmed. For the FTC. And for those who aren't as familiar with this, the FTC is who regulates antitrust and anti-competitive action. Now, she has made herself quite a name because she has advanced several legal, let's call them theories, but legal opinions that suggest that the FTC not only has the responsibility to enforce the law as it has previously been interpreted or written, but actually can create of its own volition and, research, I guess if you want to call it that, new regulatory frameworks that go beyond the actual mandate that the organization, that the agency was given when it was founded or that subsequent case law has established. It's actually a hugely radical claim. And if you're a constitutional scholar, you're really made uncomfortable by it. But at the same time, it fits the mood, certainly of the Democratic Party right now, which has wanted to say, why can't we do all these things that people like Elizabeth Warren keep saying we should do, but we have no legal basis for doing the things that she's been saying we should do. But we really like what she's saying, and so let's appoint someone who thinks we do have a legal basis for that. Now, in particular, I don't think that her appointment, because she's one of 5 commissioners, changes everything, but she does have the ability to initiate investigations and prosecutions under current. Even if she knows she's going to lose those, even if they're not going to yield anything, she can use that power to, motivate, move, and perhaps establish, move the boundaries of current case interpretation. And I think she'll do that. I think she'll do that aggressively, and I think everyone's expecting that she will, and that's the reason you'll have some senators opposed to her appointment, but they won't be able to get the votes. So we'll see how that works out. There is a bigger fundamental question about what government agencies at the federal level have the right to do. Judicial activism on the Supreme Court has been strong for the last 30, 40 years, and it hasn't been as strong in a lot of these, health and human services. Just think about all the agencies that are headed under the executive. It usually takes an executive order from the president for them to claim that they have the authority to go beyond what Congress asked them to do when they were organized. And even that has been strongly contested because the last 2 presidents both did an awful lot of executive orders. And so, we got to ask ourselves that question. If it seems expedient for our side to get what we want, we got to be aware that next time the other side's in power, they're going to do the same thing. And, that's just a fundamental issue of constitutional interpretation. But I'll just say, I think she will act strongly and she will persuade her colleagues to give her a little bit of room, and they'll test the boundaries, and that may lead to a backlash in terms of who gets appointed down the road. And it may lead to, at some point, Congress saying, we would like to specifically enact legislation that restricts this from happening. That's all what if at this point. I have no idea.
Yeah. I thought I'd close with sort of a lightning round, things that I've been watching, curious about Clubhouse, the new social media platform, audio only. Wired or tired? What's your take on Clubhouse?
Well, it's not tired yet, but it will be. And that's not because it's not a good thing. I think it can be really, really good. But it's a little bit like Snap. Snap was so good for people for a very particular period of time, and it allowed them to escape from the confines of the other social media that they were involved in. And then it was no longer as useful, and it got put to the side. And I think that'll happen at Clubhouse. It just won't be this year.
Do you think its opportunity currently behind the buzz is the pandemic itself, or failures of other places?
Well, the politics of the last several years has led to Facebook, Twitter becoming so incredibly impossible to have smart conversations with people in those platforms. And it has allowed people to say, we need a new venue. And voice is a very important way you can convey context more subtly. It's a very powerful thing. I mean, think of this more as the movement to the salon of Paris, the coffee houses of London. We think of that as a grand period of time where a lot of intellectual history was made. It's actually just a couple decades long. And it was incredibly useful, and it shaped the world, and the leading intellectuals and policymakers of the time really flocked to that because it was so useful at that time. And then it wasn't. Yeah. And so that vibe has never been resurrected in the world of salons or coffee houses. But I think that's where we are with Clubhouse. And because we live in a faster moving world, instead of several decades, it's a couple of years. Yeah,
interesting. Bitcoin, tulip bubble or the future of money?
Is not a tulip bubble. It's hard to say that it's the future of money. It is. It highlights so many things that are wrong with a fiat currency world that it's impossible to ignore. Now, does it correct all of those things? No. And is it so easily manipulatable at this stage that it's dangerous for some people? Yes. But, it is fiat currency is not the end-all, be-all of transactional guarantees and reputational management. These are all things that, I mean, if you think about it, you and I lived in a world where we wrote paper checks. And that was because, currency needed this extra layer of trust. The bank was on there. You used to write your social security number on your check in order to tell your grocer that you were a good person. Weird things like that. So those things haven't ever been fully solved. We moved to credit cards. We have chips, and that still hasn't solved some of these problems about who am I and do I have authority to access this account for this transactional amount, and can I go back in history and identify the parties that were involved in the transaction in a way that preserves their privacy, but at the same time ensures the integrity of the system. Those are all things that need to be fixed, and as long as there's an Elon Musk in the world, we're going to be pushing that boundary.
Can you say whether you have built any Bitcoin into your financial future? If it goes crazy and it's worth $1 million of Bitcoin in 20 years, are you going to be very happy, or are you pretty much sitting on the sidelines personally?
I'm on the sidelines personally. I don't. There's a lot of speculative things that I don't do just for personality reasons, and that doesn't mean I don't have. I have a tiny fraction of Bitcoin, because when it first came out, I didn't really understand how it worked, and so I thought, well, okay, I need to do a little bit here, and a little bit ends up being worth an interesting amount, but not life changing. Right. Not life changing. It's just. But watching it happen, I think, and this goes to the GameStop phenomenon, and it goes to all these non-fungible artworks that people are trying to tokens that people are trying to use. We are at a point where people don't know what to believe in anymore. And I'm not saying that in a lamentable way. And they're very willing to see if this new thing is something that I should believe in. And so millions of dollars on a non-fungible token. We're seeing, the rise of all of these different these cryptocurrencies, whichever one you think might survive. It sure says a lot about us as people, that we're so willing to latch on to this new thing as a possible solution. And it says a lot about the people who some of them get there ready to exploit the people who come after them. Right. And that's what's happening in a lot of these. Mm-hmm. And that always makes me nervous too. But And to that extent, that's where the tulip reference comes in, because the tulip phenomenon was exactly one of those things. Some speculators got in, locked everything down. That's what happens. Well, I mean, we're still seeing that in the world of video game consoles right now. It's still almost impossible to get a hold of a PS5 because there are just bots that go through, and anytime something shows up on any website that sells a PS5, the bot goes in and buys it, and then it gets sold on eBay for twice the value. And then, it's awful that there are people who spend all of their time doing that. But at the same time, it's not illegal. Yeah. It's not wrong of them. And I just feel like it would be nice if more people were motivated to create good things for the world and try to get compensated for that than simply leeching off of other people's efforts and transactions.
Trying to corner a market.
Yeah, exactly.
Which book in the last 5 months has had the most impact on your thinking and your view of the world?
I think about this book nearly every day. The Weirdest People in the World by Joseph Henrich. This is an anthropologist who has really done 20 years of research into why cultural differences yield different types of characteristics for individuals. And so WEIRD is an acronym. It's fully capitalized. It means westernized, educated, industrialized, rich, and now I'm going to forget what the D stands for. That's awful. But you can look it up. And the weirdest people in the world. And it's solid research. It's very well researched, using pretty much every method you could possibly imagine. And he's just identified one of the things that really struck me about it. So I always like to read a book and think, what is it about this book that I would not have guessed was true and now feel compelled to admit is true? And it took me 20 years as a PhD researcher to really have confidence in what we call the big five personality traits. In psychology, they call them the big five. And they've been studied pretty robustly for about 30 years. And during much of that time, I was sort of hesitant. It's like, I'm not sure I believe in immutable fundamental traits of personality. I'm not a Myers-Briggs believer. The research just isn't there for that. Apologies to anyone who's really into it. But the big five, these traits, they're robust and they hold up well and they predict certain outcomes and behaviors and they differentiate in different populations. So I finally got there. I mean, it's only in the last 5 years that I finally accepted the data that was there, because that was a hard thing to get around to. And then all of a sudden I read Henrich's book, Weirdest People in the World. And he says that when they try to replicate that research around the world, as long as you're in an industrialized country, it works. And then you get into some little tribes like the Xhosa in Africa, who are famously studied because they have one of the more hunter-gatherer based kinds of societies that's still existing today. And they do this in other places. They've done it now in the Philippines. I can't even remember all the countries where they've done it. They cannot replicate the big five personality traits. Basically, people in those environments have two personality types. And their theorizing is that because we have the luxury in our weird societies, our Western educated, industrialized, rich, and now I still can't remember what the D stands for, democratic, I think. We have the luxury of mentally specializing. Oh. And so we can identify characteristics in ourselves and hone those things and develop them. And I can become someone who's really this or that. And you can, develop a complementary skill set and personality approach so that you can pursue what's of interest to you and I can pursue what's of interest to me. If you're in a hunter-gatherer society, basically all the males have to live a certain kind of life, hunting, doing certain things, ritual performances, and so on. All the women have to do certain kinds of things. And so as a result, the two personality types that end up being verifiable and reliably predictable in the population, they are much more fundamental. It's not about whether you're neurotic or, I can't even remember what the big five are off the top of my head. But it basically comes down to whether you're someone who is more of an aggressor or more of a
Nurture.
I don't want to say I want to avoid the word nurture because that comes a little bit heavily loaded in the research because that makes it seem like it's a womanly virtue as it has often been proposed to be, but it's not. I mean, these two traits exist in the men and the women in these groups, and it's just a question of what role you end up fulfilling in your local tribe as to whether you do more of one of these things and less of the other one. But most people have both of them, at least from the researches. But anyway. So way more background than I think most people were prepared to think through. But if you read the book, he will surprise you again and again and again. And the research is compelling. I can heartily recommend it. And there's a lot of open-ended questions that he doesn't have the answer to yet and says, we need to be studying these things because they say a lot about who we are and about how our society conditions us for certain types of success or potentially certain types of failure. And so we should be aware of that. And that goes back to Amazon's decision to, try to be the best employer in the world. You've got to be an employer that's capable of encouraging the best out of lots of different types of people. And I think that's something that we can learn from this book and from just our life.
Have you traveled yet post-pandemic anywhere? Like on a plane or work going somewhere?
I have not traveled for work. I don't believe I'll be doing that until Q4 this year is probably the earliest that I'll do that. I'll be well vaccinated by then. I'm not currently vaccinated. I have my appointment for next week. Now in Massachusetts, we're finally able to get appointments for people in my category. So I'm waiting for that. I have traveled for family reasons. We had a family funeral. We had... And you mask up, you treat it very, very carefully. You stay socially distanced, and but it's not something I would like to do often until that vaccine comes through. Just so that you don't have to carry that extra risk. We have a good friend here who's in his 40s, a healthy guy. His family, they keep themselves so carefully protected, and they do not know how he got COVID, but he got it 3 weeks ago. Ended up going to the hospital. It just ended up being awful. It's been 3 weeks now of just horrible struggle and isolation in his own home from his children and his wife. And I just think, I'm not going to be cavalier about this thing. I'm firmly on the side of believing that the more vaccinated we are, the better. He is. He's in recovery. But it's just, as you read and you will hear from people, recovery is hard.
Right.
And some people, it's months later, and they're still not sure they're recovered.
That makes it real.
Yeah. I'd rather avoid all that.
Makes sense. I have been speaking with James McQuivey, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester. Thanks very much, James.
Absolutely, Len. Great to talk to you.
It's always good to talk with James. I think I'm going to make a note to ask him about things that I'm following each time I talk with him, because the two lightning round questions he turned out to be prescient on. There's an article today in Vanity Fair by Nick Bilton titled "The Clubhouse Party is Over," and it talks about falling numbers in terms of engagement and downloads. So I'm not sure if the party is really over, but that one's heading down. And this week, at about the time that I was talking with him, Bitcoin has fallen from a high of $64,000, which was looking pretty good a couple of weeks ago, down to under 50,000. So he's probably wise not to be engaging in speculative behavior, which he said is not part of his personality. I will be returning to Clubhouse on Saturday, tomorrow, April 24th at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, to talk about the conversation with James and anything else that you'd like to visit with. I have about 10 free invites to Clubhouse, which I don't think are quite so rare as they used to be. But if you'd like an invite to Clubhouse, just send me an email at podchronicles@gmail.com and include your cell phone number, because they need that to get you in as a member. I think I'm probably the following week going to shift to Monday or Tuesday, because I'm trying to clear out our weekends. I'm thinking of it as kind of a weekend protection plan. And with that in mind, I've gone to 5 days a week for the morning journal, the flash briefing that I do on Alexa. So it's just Monday through Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday I don't upload a morning briefing. It's part of Darlene's and my settling into the house here in Cambridge. We've been working so hard. We had all these boxes that from the move from Denver, and memorabilia and photos and letters and old poems I published. And it's been great to get our arms around it. But now we have all of this stuff in the garage that we've got to get if it's a yard sale or giving it away or what. And I have an embarrassing number of Alexa devices. I've got, old Echoes and old Dots and old things that they don't even sell anymore. And I probably will just end up giving them away. I deregistered them all, so I hope that if I send them off to a new home, they're not able to, they don't give people a chance to get into my Amazon account. But and I've got my great-grandfather Skelton's clock is here in the bookcase. Let's see if you're gonna, you're not gonna have a chance to hear it because I'm just about finished. But it does this ticking all the time. It's just like a presence in the room that reminds me of it's over 100 years old. And I remember my trips up to Lewiston, Maine at Thanksgiving to at great-grandpa Skelton's house, and the bonging has been damaged by the move. It's got kind of a rattly sound, so I'm going to have to go in there and try to do some audio fixing to this 100-year-old clock. Actually, we're close enough to 9 p.m. that I can move the minute hand ahead, and so that we'll have, instead of our outro music from Ramon, we'll give you the sound of the clock. Here, hold on just a sec. Kind of a sad sound, but it's a sound for the ages. Thanks for listening.